Welcome, everybody. Are we live streaming? Clive's just given me a bit of an update with. We're recording, but not live streaming. Yeah, that's fine. Now, Clive's just given me an update on the technical, uh, or not so technical issues with that. So, but thank you for the update there, Clive. Okay, welcome, members, and Helen Lillington from the external auditor, Rachel Ashley Corner, who's our internal auditor. I'll just give the opening script. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this evening and the meeting will be recorded. And as Adam's confirmed, it's not being live streamed at the moment. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak and use their microphone when speaking for the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light displays. Please switch mobile phones to silent, and in the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits located around the sides of the chamber, and please assemble in the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation to allow the public to film and record or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. I am Councillor Lee Higgins, and I will chair this meeting of Audit and Standards Committee, and I confirm we have the following Melton Borough Council officers in attendance tonight. We have Dawn Garton, Director of Corporate Services, Clive Tobin, Assistant Director for Governance and Democracy, Rachel Ashley Corn, the Chief Internal Auditor, and Adam Green, the Senior Democratic Services and Scrutiny Officer. Also joining us tonight is Helen from Grant Thornton. Apologies for absence. I understand we have apologies from Councillor Mason, Atherton, Sharp, and are there any others that have been raised? The only one that was raised was Elaine Holmes, but she said she was apologising for a sub, so I don't think that necessarily counts. But I've had no other apologies. Have you at all, Adam?
No, I've had no other apologies.
No. Move on with that. Thank you. Minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of March 2025, and I ask for a proposer, or are there any amendments? I will move the minutes then. If anyone going to second? He wasn't here. I was looking to the auctioneer, but you know. Thank you, Mike. So yes, otherwise this would be a long meeting. Otherwise, and all those in favour? Any abstentions? Yep. Okay, that's carried, and I will sign the minutes accordingly. Just give me 1 second. Thank you, Clive. Declarations of interest. To invite members who wish to make declarations of interest in respect to items on the agenda for this evening. No declarations have been made. If any interest you feel crops up in the meeting, please raise your hand at the time. Obviously, we've got a packed agenda. There's a lot of detail in here as well. So I do understand it may be where you come up to some part and you think, actually, I have an interest through that. We can always refer that to Clive should that come up. Okay, so number 4, external review of the housing benefit subsidy. Dawn, to provide a brief introduction to the report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The external audit review of housing benefits subsidy is separate to the main external audit. So it's done as a separate piece of work. We're still on catch up on this. So the report in front of you this evening relates to 2022-23, and I'm hopeful that we can get 23-24 to you shortly, and then we'll be up to date with this as we are with the main statement of accounts audit. Another positive review, and we continue to make good progress. As is inevitable, I think that the sample testing still did identify a small number of errors, but these had negligible impact in terms of the value of those errors. And hopefully, as we move forward, we can continue to make good progress, which will reduce the additional sample selection that the auditors need to do to gain assurance, which reduces the cost of the audit, not just the direct cost, but also the cost of officer time as well in undertaking those additional checks. So everything's in front of members here. If you've got any queries, then happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
I don't have any queries. Does any other member? This is to be noted. Alison?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. So, as a sample is taken and there have been some minor errors found, would that not suggest that you would do more sampling rather than reduce the amount that you sample? Thank you.
Yes, exactly. That's the case. So if they find an error in a certain area, then what that means is they have to do what they call 40 plus sampling or cake testing. So it means that we have to have a further sample size taken, and that takes up not just our staff time if they do some of that testing on behalf of the auditor, but also the auditor as well in verifying that. And then that additional testing carries on afterwards as well until they find no further errors. I think it's probably in the report, but I think it's another 2 further years. So, and that's what we're aiming for all the time, to have to not do that additional 40 plus testing and thereby reducing the cost of the audit and also officer time as well.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I was reading about the cake testing. So yeah, that is in the report. Thank you.
Well, as a councillor for 10 years, I've seen many acronyms in my time in the council. I don't think I've ever quite come across cake testing before. So, but there we go. So cumulative assurance, knowledge and experience testing. So, yeah, there we go. Any other comments at all? Otherwise, this is to note. Okay, members, thank you. I will move on to item number 5, which is the annual report on procurement exemptions. The report author is Mark Fisher. I don't think he's here tonight, but we have Dawn to provide the introduction on this report, and this is also to note as well. Dawn, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. So this was actually arose out of an external audit recommendation in last year's audit report to commence providing an annual report on the details behind any procurement exemptions that were granted in year. I think it's been a really useful exercise, actually. I think officers have found it very useful. Mark, as our head of procurement, has pulled out all of the exemptions that were approved under delegation, and they're all attached at the appendix for you to have a look at. And I'm pleased to see when I look through them, I think, you know, there was valid and genuine reasons for all of those and they were justifiable. I just think it's a useful piece of work and just provide that assurance over what's being approved under delegation, and we'll continue to do this on an annual basis. Thank
you. Any comments or in regards to Appendix 1 or the costs on there, or Appendix 2? Alison, over to you.
Just to agree that it's a really useful exercise to see it, and also how assuring it is to see the reasons for the exemptions. So although the cost associated attached to it, with having that valid reason why those exemptions cost money, I think that's a really good useful report. So just to agree, really. Thanks.
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, I fully agree with everything you just said there, because I think sometimes public procurement, because of its convolutedness, can actually end up being more expensive to the organisation and ultimately the taxpayer. And that's not, you know, some of it is to anti-corruption and bribery reasons, which is very valid. However, sometimes it can equally put a load of costs and difficulties in the value actually being extracted in the procurement itself. So yes, I agree. I think the approval reason is very useful to read. When Dawn, do they all come to you for a final sign off, or is it somebody else at all?
It's myself and Clive as the monitoring officer and section 151 officer. And we do scrutinise them, so we will make sure that we're comfortable with those. I believe as well that procurement comment, but the ultimate sign off is myself and Clive.
Thank you. So that is to note as well. So we've got the move on to agenda item number 6. And this is the internal audit annual report. And Rachel would give a brief update and introduction into the report, and then we can make comments accordingly. This is also to note as well. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual internal audit report and opinion for 2024-25. So as your head of internal audit, I'm required on an annual basis to provide you with an assurance opinion that would inform your annual governance statement. So that assurance opinion is over the Council's overall governance, risk and control framework. So that's the purpose of the report today. So the opinion is set out for you in page 3 of the appendix, page 35 of the pack. So the opinion that I've given is of moderate assurance, which is as per the definitions that you're used to receiving as part of our audit assignments, and is set out in section 4.1 of the report in terms of the definitions. So essentially it sets out that we have some areas of good practice. We fundamentally have a good control framework, but there were some areas where we identified opportunities for improvement, or where there were some weaknesses in either the design or the compliance with controls. So also within the box, I've then broken down the opinion a little bit more into financial control, risk management and internal control as well, just to give you a little bit of a breakdown on each of those areas. And then the rest of the report essentially provides you with the basis for that annual opinion for 24-25. So I'll just walk members briefly through the report. I'll be happy to take any questions. So the table of 1 on page 37 of the pack provides a breakdown of all of the finalised audit opinions for the year. So as you'll see from here, 92% of your opinions were of at least moderate assurance, which helps to inform my overall moderate assurance opinion. Of those who received a limited assurance, those had been already received by this committee and discussed, and both related to compliance elements within the audits that we looked at, which were on the asset development programme and the homelessness applications. So action plans are in place in relation to both of those. So that again gives me some reassurance around the progress being made. You have a lot more detail then in table 3, which takes you through each of the audit assignments and provides you with the 3 assurance opinions that was given for each of those audits. So the majority of these have already been reported to you as a committee throughout the year as part of my progress reporting. But anything that hadn't been finalised as at the time of your last meeting is included in the internal audit progress report later on in the agenda, and is referenced here in terms of the overall opinions as well, and noted as reported in July 25. So also within the report, another thing that informs my assurance opinion is the implementation of agreed management actions. So where we have identified an area for improvement, we will make a recommendation and agree an action with management. And if those are implemented in a timely manner, that enables me to give a good assurance opinion again. So that informs my assurance. So as you will see in table 4 on page 40 of the pack, page 8 of the appendix, there have been 77 actions implemented during the year, and this represents 80% of the audit actions which were due for implementation. And I just wanted to highlight that that is a marked improvement from the previous year when we had a 60% implementation rate. So I think that has improved, and that obviously gives me a greater level of assurance. I have also noted in the report any other sources of assurance that I'm able to place reliance upon. So I have referenced in paragraphs 4.8 and 4.9 on page 41 of the pack around the assurances that we have on the Council's shared ICT partnership through a Leicestershire ICT partnership. So they are subject to an internal audit on an annual basis, and we do receive a copy of that when it's not us that's delivering it. And the report on this year was in relation to IT asset management. It has received a limited assurance opinion, so I have had to note it within this report, but I'm reassured that there's an action plan in place which is being monitored by the steering group, and that's something that we will report back on as well. On a positive note, I've also acknowledged that we have had evidence of public sector network compliance being achieved by the partnership during the year, which gives us some assurance around the network security and controls in that area. So finally, section 5 of the report reflects on the performance of internal audit ourselves, so how we performed in terms of delivering your audit plan, which we have delivered 100% of, so we have met our objectives there. I've also reflected on the survey results from audit clients in table 5 on page 41 of the pack, where all of the assurance assignments we've delivered have received feedback of either good or outstanding from the clients that we've worked with, and I've also included some comments there around the value of the audit process. Finally, there is a reference on from paragraph 5.7 on page 42 of the papers to professional standards compliance. So I need to reflect that also in the annual report. Again, later on in the agenda today, there is a report on our external quality assessment. So I have referenced that here because that does give you some assurance on the basis of which I've reached your annual assurance opinion for 24-25, and that we have been externally assessed as operating in conformance with the standards during that period. The last thing I'd mention in section 6 is the counter-fraud activity on page 44 of the pack, page 12 of the appendix. And we just maintain a fraud log of any referrals that are notified to us of any fraud allegations. Some of these come through on the report fraud mailbox that we monitor on a daily basis. Some of them have been flagged through the National Fraud Initiative. So during the year, we had 10 referrals that were referred to us. 8 of those had been closed as at the end of March. And we had outcomes which are detailed within here just as a summary. One of those did result in monies being recovered of over £3,000. In that case, it was identified as an error rather than fraud, but albeit we still received all of the money back in full for the council, which is good news. So that is a run through of the key sections of the report. And as I've said, this should be one of your key sources of assurance for the annual governance statement for that year, which you obviously have also on the agenda today. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any comments from any members there? As Rachel said, some of the individual reports have come to us during the year, but is any other comments coming? No, Rachel. Well, maybe they'll come on the next report, but so this one is to note on there. So thank you, members. To move on to the annual governance, it is to note, isn't it? I've got notes here. Yes, I'm correct on that. We don't need a motion on that one. It's note, yeah. I'm right. Thank you. The draft annual governance statement. So this report is on page 47 of the packs. This one is. The recommendation is to approve the Council's annual governance statement for the 2024-25 year as set out in Appendix A of the report. And any comments on any issues that may arise? Clive, I will go to you first, please.
Thank you, Chair. As members of the committee will be aware, this is, I suppose the clue's in the title, it's an annual requirement for us to publish a statement. This has to be published alongside our statement of accounts. And by the 30th of May each year, we have to publish a draft of that document. The Council's external auditors will then review that, and they will feed into the final content, and that will be coming to you later in the year for approval and sign-off. At that stage, once this committee is given approval, it will be the Chief Executive and the leader who sign off the document itself. As I said, this is an annual requirement. It's a statutory requirement under the audit. Excuse me, start again. It is a statutory requirement under the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015 to publish this. The sources which the Council uses to compile this are, as Rachel pointed out, the internal audit reports, external audit reports, assurance from senior managers in the organisation. We review local and ombudsman reports and performance management. We also look at the financial control assurance, risk registers, and any other statutory or non-statutory inspection reports, and also review our regulatory and legal assurance. So this has a a broad reaching approach across the authority, and all directorates feed into it to give the relevant assurances within their area. Moving to the document itself, the key areas for consideration come at the end, and we're at page 78 of the report, and this looks at the first table there looks at the previous areas for improvement in the previous year, which were carried over. Members will be familiar with some of those. Financial sustainability has been on the governance statement for several years now. As we know, the council's financial position, as all local authorities, continues to be strained, I think is probably the word we'd use to describe it. Harking back to the next item, harking back to the fire, although it was now over a decade ago, the fact that so much property information was lost there remains an issue for us, because some of the historic information about the land holdings that we have has been destroyed. We've made some progress in reviewing old decision records, etc., that are held in the Records Office, and each project that we look at, we do the most thorough investigation of title, etc., as we can. But of course, the absence of those documents is potentially a risk, and that's why it remains on the statement for this year. And then there has been a few internal issues with perhaps I'd say politically motivated complaints, etc., which has had quite a draw on senior management's time over the last year and diverted resources elsewhere. So that's been added. It seems to have subsided to a large extent now, but obviously at the time it's had that potential impact on senior officers being able to divert their attention to other strategic issues. The next matters relate to the planned maintenance programme for corporate assets. That is something which is very much in hand but remains on the register because the piece of work isn't complete. There is now a project board to keep track of this and has oversight from the Director of Place and Prosperity, and it has input of all relevant senior officers and operational officers. So very much in hand, but still something that we need to be aware of and keep flagging up. The issue of the solar farm appeal has now disappeared. That was on last year's statement as a specific issue, but we are keeping a watching eye on the general position with appeals against planning decisions, which can have further implications, including government intervention. We're not nearly at that stage yet, but it's a matter of making sure that we keep on top of those things and have the right mechanisms in place to avoid that becoming an issue. And the final issue in that area relates to the external funding for projects like the LUF and UKSPF. Again, whilst those things are largely on track, they are items of high value and significant community impact, and whilst progressing well, those remain as risks for the forthcoming year. And then the final, sorry, I did say that was the last one. It's not. The final one is the asset management plan, and that links to the work I mentioned a moment ago through the new project board that's been established, and it also feeds into the medium-term financial strategy, which was mentioned at the outset. So those are the main areas for concern from last year. And then moving to page 81, we have the actions for the forthcoming year for the areas of improvement. Most of these carry over because they are ongoing matters, as I mentioned a moment ago. So financial sustainability, that's the development of a what's called Plan B, and that's a matter that's been pursued by Dawn as Director of Resources. There is a few historic records missing from the contracts register. Again, that's something that's being looked at, and we're doing a retrospective exercise to identify those and ensure that the register is updated. The next action relates to the lost property information. As I mentioned, we're doing some work with the Records Office to try and assimilate that with the records that we do hold. And as I say, that's going on a case-by-case basis for any major property transactions that we do. And then there's the resource consumption from the politically motivated complaints that I mentioned a few moments ago. And that's being continues to be discussed with relevant members at regular meetings. The property and assets team's fragility is the next item. There have been a number of issues in supporting information to evidence property valuation work that received a limited assurance audit report, and that's now been picked up through a service improvement plan, and again being seen by the programme board. So that's bringing together all these property matters. Members will be only too aware of issues that arose in relation to the process for increasing parking charges. Whilst that's now been remedied, it's on the register to keep a it's on the statement to keep a watching brief on that and ensure that any other changes that we need to make follow the correct process. And then the final item is to pick up actions from the adverse findings from the homelessness internal audit. And the action for that is to continue to implement those recommendations. So, Chair, those are the sort of headlines from that, unless members have any questions.
Thank you, Clive. It was very comprehensive. So I'll open it up to the floor if there's any questions from anyone. Alison?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to look at something that's on page 78 of the whole agenda pack, and I've been involved in Melton Borough Council for a time spanning of 18 years. I don't think I've ever read comments like a breakdown in political relationships causing a distraction and affecting capacity and affecting resources, to the point in which, you know, we've just been in like a session where we've been talking over different things about the council, what the council are facing going forward, and you know, assets being one of those things, but also you know, our officers being an asset in terms of being able to enact their roles and jobs, because we're going to need as much kind of officer time as possible to take us over these next few years, in terms of our, you know, the financial instability that we potentially could face. And I just didn't think it was something that we should brush over and just vote and note something without actually trying to get some kind of explanation about how has this appeared on a report to the point where it's distracted and affected our capacity and resources that much. It makes me very sad to see that on a report as a reason why officers can't do their job. And as an audit function, I think it's only right that we should highlight it, because, you know, just kind of putting our hands up and going, I note this, I don't think's you know, a valid use of what a member on the Audit and Standards Committee should do. So have we got you know, how you know, I'm kind of like in two minds. How badly has it affected us, and do we not need to kind of have a word with ourselves and sort ourselves out, because this shouldn't really be allowed to continue?
Okay, so I'll hand over to Clive. Listen to his words very carefully, and that would be, as I say, we'll listen to Clive first, and then we can add some commentary on that. As chair, I know a little bit more. So,
as a caveat to
Mhm.
to the statement stroke question, this is not about trying to open anything up. I'm not looking for a debate. I'm not looking for a rehash of things that have already happened. This is something about moving forward and making sure that we are as efficient and effective as possible. I personally don't want to know the kind of minutiae of detail that goes into how it's arrived there. It's just about going forward. Does that make sense?
Very much so. Clive?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, it's not really the forum to go into individual cases in any event, and that wasn't my intention in answering. Obviously, members will be aware of standards regime. It falls within the remit of this committee. It's possibly fair to say that we've had a higher number of complaints in that preceding year than is common either for this council or a council of this size generally. It's unfortunate that while some of those were validly made, doesn't necessarily mean they were evidence of a breach of the code. That some of them are validly made. Some, unfortunately, seem to have been made with an ulterior motivation. And unfortunately, whilst the arrangements for dealing with standards complaints can, after properly reviewing them, rebut those sorts of complaints, some of the fallout has found its way into other arenas, and it has drawn in members of the senior leadership team to pick up matters. So it's difficult to be more detailed than that. But unfortunately, these matters have flared up, I think is the correct way to say it, at particular times where there has been a risk that it's prevented matters progressing or progressing council business in the correct way. It's diverted particularly senior leadership team, sometimes the whole team, sometimes only several members, to put resources into other matters. I think the positive is that this has subsided significantly. We are now at a situation where we have one live complaint ongoing. That's more where we should be for an authority of this size. There have been some really constructive discussions in various forums, and whilst that there's mention of the group leaders meeting, that doesn't imply that people in group leaders meetings are the problem. It's just been a useful approach to try and bring some of these issues out and to resolve them and look at the underlying issues. So it has been positive from all concerned in that process. So it is improving significantly, but obviously what we don't want to do is just be complacent now and think we've solved everything and not keep listening to people if they have legitimate concerns to raise, but make sure we do it in the right way, not let them escalate, not let them derail us from things, but have that opportunity for people to raise them in a constructive way.
Before I bring you in, Mike, I'll just add on that, and Clive, you can interject at any moment in time. So the chair and the vice chair have a regular briefing with the monitoring officer. One meeting we did have, and as I've gone on record, I said at full council that we just heard, I said at the most recent standards meeting, and hopefully all members and officers will know my view on standards is it must be fair to respondent and complainant, and equally because someone makes a complaint doesn't make that wrong, but equally because a respondent is at the centre of a complaint doesn't mean that they are wrong as well. What I am aware is some complaints were appeared to be incredibly well, you could use the word vexatious on some of them, which equally as any member who's had a complaint come in, it impacts that member. It does impact that member, even if they know they haven't done anything in there. I believe that the officers and the monitoring officers very carefully looked at those and rebutted any that feel if they're either personally or politically motivated. And then obviously if the code has been engaged, but that has taken some considerable amount of legal time up, and that has been difficult. But all I will say is, as chair, and I hope obviously what I said at full council as well, that all as members, while I'm chair, you will have a fair hearing. And if I do not believe that the complaint is fair, I will have those comments as well as the chair. And I know my vice chair would say the absolute same. So some of the feedback from members, and again, I'm not going to mention any names, but some of the feedback from members who have felt that they've been individually targeted from vexatious and non-legitimate complaints have said that they felt that the process has been fair before it even went further along. As we know, when as standards there is a legitimate complaint, that the process will be run through. And we had a recent experience of that. I won't go into that particular case, but the council, in that particular case, the respondent had ample time to comment on that. There was the council invested in a very experienced individual to listen to all sides and put forward his report. And that would be the general process there. But you do make a very good point, Alison, because it has taken some significant capacity, and the standards process and other things are not there to individually or vexatiously target individuals and create what is a hostile environment. And the hostile environment cannot happen for officers or members. But if a member has if someone feels a member has erred, then the complaint system is there as well. So it's not a free-for-all, but equally we will hold that. So that's the assurance I can give on a very general part of it, but I'm very pleased you did raise that. So Mike.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Alison for actually flagging this one up. My issue, and I also don't want to have a debate about where's and why falls in detail, but it's actually the use of the term a breakdown in political relationships, because I don't recognise that. I think there has been some issues about interpersonal conflict, if I can put it that way, between councillors who may or may not be in different political groups. But I don't think it's correct to characterise it as political relationships. In fact, I find, and certainly in the committee I chair, scrutiny, I find we have good relationships across the piece with all the members of that committee from whatever political group they are, the same as in this committee. So I just don't like that particular phraseology there, because I think as this is going to be a published statement, I think it gives a false impression of the more general situation within the council. What is true, and if I jump ahead to the action proposed, and I think I'm the only group leader in the room, the issue of some of these matters and the difficulties they've caused has been raised in group leader meetings, simply to so we can encourage our own members to reflect upon how they're actually processing issues, if I can put it that way. That's the only extent to which it's in the political arena, because the group leaders obviously have a role in talking to the members of their groups and counselling them on how they raise matters and how they behave. So as the agenda item is for approval, I think I've got to nail my colours to the mast. I am not comfortable approving that wording that says a breakdown in political relationships. I understand the underlying issue that Clive has raised in the impact it's had on resources, but I would like that wording, and I'm not going to suggest the words because my brain doesn't work quickly enough. But I would like it to be expressed in a different way. The technologies there have been some issues with relationships within the council causing problems, but not necessarily political relationships. That personally, I don't think it is political. I think it's personal. Thank you.
Before I go to the officers, I agree with that. And equally, I think that one of the words that the leader of the council has used, which I used in a question at full council, there's a spectrum of decency. And when I was presenting the audit reports at full council, we were saying it's been non-political and people are working very well. The spectrum of decency comes through, and as anybody knows, Mike and myself are usually known as the two troublemakers from either ends of the spectrum, but we get on really well, and we see lots of things in a very similar way, though we come at it in a different way of politically speaking. But so whether there is that spectrum of decency, which I think Pip coined, and I do like that, because I think a significant part of it is people just are trying to just get on and do the job. So I'll go to Dawn and then the monitoring officer, and I don't know whether if we change the wording, whether that, if we don't work that out tonight, whether that's a delegated thing and then in consultation with chair and vice chair or something. But Dawn?
I was just trying to think of some wording that you might find more acceptable, taking on board the points made. So could it be changing it from political relationships to a number of member relationships?
But also on that, some of it, hang on, I'll just have a word with the monitor officer before I speak. What I was going to say, Clive, I've just said it to Clive, so I'm not meant to say this, Clive. It's not all been within the chamber. It's not all the members here. So while we could say it's members, it's some of it actually isn't. So I'm trying to be really with the monitoring officer. I'll bring you in, Jim, and then obviously what Clive's thinking.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I agree with my fellow councillors' input on this. I think we are moving into the realms of semantics, but then, as somebody had said recently, I think in political debate, words do actually matter. So what we don't want to do, I would suggest, is put forward any set of words that could give the general public the impression that there is a lot of disputes between the councillors that have reached an unacceptable level, and words such as breakdown, very negative word, breakdown of relationships, even worse. If it could be put forward on the basis that there have been issues that have involved councillors where there has had to be an excessive involvement of council officers to resolve them, it sort of becomes more positive and it's downplayed. But I do agree with my colleagues that the current wording paints the council in a bad light, and I think we have to avoid that. We're not being fair to ourselves if we put it in those terms.
No, and I agree. I think the spectrum of decency, I think there's a majority of that. So it's not out of 28 members, it's not 14 arguing or whatever. So yeah. And equally there is an external element as well.
I'm just wondering if, as one member suggested, whether this is something where there is a delegation to amend that in a form of words that's agreed with the chair, but can be circulated to all members beforehand. Because I think the danger here is that we've highlighted an issue, and that we try to do it almost in a rush without stepping back. I think the original wording was to illustrate the sort of the level of this, and so sort of political. And I accept the points that have been made. Political was seen as perhaps distinguishing it as being at a high level, whereas it's possibly I agree, suggesting wider rather than anything else and a bigger problem. So if members are happy to do so, I'm happy to have a delegation to myself as an officer to agree in consultation with Lee, but we'll circulate that wording to everyone so that they can have an input and comment. As I mentioned earlier, the final version of this is published when the external auditors have reviewed this and all the other work, in the context of all the other work that they do. So there is potential for other changes as well. Obviously, we have representative from our external audit tonight, so that's partly given a sort of a heads up on the importance of this, but also the sensitivity of getting it right. And obviously, I think it's important that we also work with you to make sure that we don't mislead in that respect as well. So I don't know if that's something that we should leave until the external auditors have finished their work for them to comment further, because this has to be signed off ultimately in its final form by this committee. So I'm thinking now that there's another we can amend this wording now, but there's also another opportunity to reflect later and make sure that it's right as an outcome of that whole audit process.
Helen.
Just thought I'd help. It's true that we will look at this as part of the audit. We don't necessarily comment particularly on wording. Our role is very much to see, have you met the guidelines? But we also read it from a point of view of, does it chime with everything we know about the council? Does it feel consistent with our CAKE, which is one of your new acronyms that you enjoy so much? So we read it from that perspective. So I know we are not due to start the audit until the audit proper effectively until the beginning of September, but it is a standalone piece of work that I can read that through, and if I've got any further comments, certainly come back to yourself, Clive and Dawn, and I'm happy to work with this sort of offline so we can get a more agreed position earlier rather than later, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think leaving it to when the final version comes here, just in case there's any, there's any objection to that, will be too late, because obviously straight afterwards we have to publish that final version. So what comes here would not, it would be really difficult to change that. So I think we'd be better to do it as an iterative process, I think.
Yeah. We've all been discussing this item tonight, and we've all come up with this solution, what the wording probably should say. Can't we do that tonight rather than keep going around the houses? We're all in agreement it needs changing. That's my own thoughts on the matter. I'm happy for that, but obviously with all the sensitivity, if Clive interjects, I would advise just to stop, but equally Clive may want to comment on it.
I think it's fair to say that we know the direction of travel, if you want to call it that. We know that we need to refine it. I think the danger is that we can tonight we can consider certain consequences and connotations from certain wording, but what I don't want to do is feel pressured to do it now, effectively in a live meeting, when we can have a chance to reflect. We've heard everyone's views and they seem pretty consistent. But it's just making sure that by correcting one problem, we don't create another. And that's why I'm reluctant to give it final sign off here.
So, Clive, I don't know everything, but I obviously when we do meet, and I do know and respect your learned judgment on this. And bearing in mind, I think, like you said, the direction of travel. Are we? First of all, just to, is there any other comments on any other parts of it? And if there are, then we can come to that later. If there are no other comments on any other part of the document, that's fine if there are. And just on this particular point, the limited information that I know, obviously with the Clive in his capacity as monitoring officer, he's acutely aware. So I do trust Clive to find the right wording. I think also, as Clive was saying, things have been changing for the better. And like you said, there's one current live complaint. I'm not aware about that one at the moment. We haven't had that briefing. I don't get to find out about the complaints. I just know if there's how many there are. But that from any of the chairs briefings we've had, there ended up being a significant amount. And to hear that there's one, is a huge change in that. So, so are we deferring just this particular part, Clive? Because I know, there's a timeline, equally, but I do agree with the members. The wording matters, but I agree with you from what I do know. I think to change it probably could compromise anything what you're trying to achieve. But
Yeah, that was just my thought of changing it, then finding for some other reason we've misled or misindicated the position, and then we end up in a sort of cycle with that. So obviously, if members have other comments on other aspects of this, we can look at those separately. But I'd be happy with a very specific delegation on that refers to the need to review that wording and circulate that to members, and then sign off in consultation with the chair, because that keeps control. It keeps the input of the committee, and so it means that everyone can sort of sit back, have a think, and just make sure they're absolutely happy with that.
okay, I will go to you, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't a new comment, but it's a reiteration of the point that I made when I first started speaking. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Mike Brown that I don't want this report to reflect how I behave or I'm seen as a councillor. And I really truly agree with altering the wording. But my concern that I raised initially was about the cost to the council, and that's kind of what the report's talking about. And I don't want to kind of go around thinking that the reason I raised that comment was a political reason. It was purely as a cost to our council, and if we're to take the our financial sustainability as one of the key priorities of the council, then going forward we don't need to be seeing these distractions or this diversion of resources for us as a council. So that was, I just wanted to bring it back to the main reason I said that point in the first place.
A very valid and well-made point. One of the meetings that I had with Clive and Tom on some of this, and as I say, I wasn't necessarily informed of who made the complaints or who they were about. That all I was assured that they were probably vexatious was potentially a word used, or whether Clive can interject at any point if I'm ever straying. But just to give you that assurance, we've had that with that information, and I think at one point Clive said on a weekly basis it was one legal FTE of the week, one day being used, which is a significant cost. And so, yes, you're dead right. It is a huge, significant cost. And all again, going back to the point, why we've absolutely made the standards process robust isn't to deflect that if any member has or is in breach or may be in breach, it isn't to deflect that and stop complaints coming in. It absolutely isn't. What it is not is just because someone wants to use the standards process and abuse it, and either abuse the public taxpayer use of that and officer time, and or the individual member, whoever they may be, either now or in the future. And that's why I hope we have a very robust standards process, which is absolutely fair to the respondents of any complaints that come in. And I think probably that may also be a reason of why we're seeing this one curtailed at some point. However, I do think, and I do agree with the legal team, we just need to be aware of it, because obviously monitoring officers may change. I'm not saying Clive's off for a new job or anything like that, but equally, if somebody else came in, or we had a new legal person or new monitoring officer, and then they wonder what's going on. So it's to hand that over should anybody pick this document up. But I do agree with the point, and the whole focus has been about the cost to the council and the resources. And I know this is this is recorded. This is not. Thank you, members. So thank you for the debate there. I'm sure at some point on that we will. So we're deferring that particular comment, which I believe Clive is going to come back to you're going to come back to the chair and vice chair first, then committee, or you're going to go to all of us as committee?
Chair, the proposal I had was to amend the recommendation so that 2.1 reads, approves the Council's annual governance statement for 2024-25 as set out in Appendix A to this report, subject to the monitoring officer drafting a form of words relating to political relationships on page 78 of the agenda, circulating that wording to committee members for their comments, and agreeing a final form of words in consultation with the chair, so that once everyone's had their chance to comment, that you get the final sign off.
Okay, and yes, and obviously we'll probably end up reviewing a little bit of this, next year as well, and hopefully we'll see where that goes. Any other debate on that? And I really appreciate the nuances and the comments made. So, any other comments on that at all? No. So, Alison, would you like to propose that then?
Happy to propose it, Chair.
Mike, second. Thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, members. Item 8, external audit plan. So Helen is here from Grant Thornton. As ever, Helen, it's always a pleasure to welcome you to Melton again, and thank you for all the work that you've done so far. So is it been a year now? So a year? Bearing in mind, I think councils hadn't seen an external audit, and this council hadn't, and not that wasn't Grant Thornton, that was previous. So, but it's nice to see you guys here. So, Helen, can you give us an update on what you've presented to us today?
Yeah, certainly, Chair, and good evening, everybody. So what you have in front of you today is the audit plan for the year ending March 2025. You'll note from the plan that we actually issued it beginning of April, so we only just missed the last audit committee. So apologies, you've had to wait for this. What the audit plan sets out, as you'll all be familiar with now, is it sets out the scope of the audit, both in terms of the financial statements work that we undertake, but also the work we take on the value for money arrangements. So I'm just walking you through some of those sort of key highlights, and you'll be sort of familiar with the format of the plan now. So in terms of the financial statements, we focus very much on areas of risk, and they are not areas where we are ultimately saying that we think you have a problem at the council. They are risks in terms of they are the areas that need the biggest amount of audit work for us, and they are the areas that could impact on our audit opinion. And we focus very much around areas that could be open to levels of manipulation because there are levels of estimation in there. So there are focuses of our work. So management override of controls is one that you will see on each and every audit plan that is ever issued, because that is part of the standards. Then you will see there are significant risks around the estimations around valuation of property, plant and equipment and investment properties. Again, not because we think that there is anything particularly wrong, but it is the area that is most prone to errors because of the way that those numbers are put together in terms of the accounts. And again, very standard, very common across local government and for that matter in terms of NHS clients. So again, nothing out of the ordinary. And similarly, the fourth one on there, it talks about the estimation around the pension fund numbers, again, just because of their significance in terms of their numbers and their estimations. So our focus on the audit is very much around those areas. We also highlight what we call another area of risk, which is as a result of a change in standards, which is IFRS 16, which talks about leases. It's been well documented that this has been coming. In fact, it's been deferred a number of times, and those that have been on this committee for a while would be familiar with that we knew that was coming. Again, we are not anticipating that being material for you as a council, but equally, as it is the first time that has come in, it requires an extra level of scrutiny just to make sure that those disclosures are complete. So it's a slightly odd time of the year for me to present in the audit plan, because we've actually done the planning and we've also done some interim work, building on the sort of good relationships that we had with the council and the finance officers last year. So on what is our page 30, and I think your page 114, we set out some interim work. So what we've actually been able to do is undertake some transactions in year rather than leaving it until we get the draft financial statements. And those have progressed really, really well and in line with what we would expect. Just in terms of a brief update, the council submitted the draft financial statements on the 12th of June, which again is in advance of that statutory deadline at the end of June, which is great news. And we've already been on site for a couple of weeks working with finance teams to actually pick some of those final samples. And what that's enabled us to do is it just shifts some of that workload. So you'll be familiar when auditors come in, we pick lots of samples and we're asking you to turn information around really quickly. What we've actually agreed to the finance team this year is we come in for that initial 2-week period, we pick all of those things and then we go away and leave you to get on with it, so that actually when we come back, when we're coming back, beginning of September, you'll have actually had a bit more time to sort of pick those and to be a bit more considered. So we're hoping again that will provide us with some efficiencies in terms of the audit process. So that takes you through the sort of financial statements piece. I obviously wear a second hat in terms of value for money, and you get the value for money report as well. You will notice that this year we've identified one significant weakness in arrangements, and again that is at part of the planning stage, and that is part of us focusing our work, and that is around the financial sustainability piece. So as we work through that is the area that we will be focusing most in terms of the value for money work, and you'll see the output of that as part of the auditor's annual report when we report that later in the year. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I'm happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Helen. Any comments from any members? I don't have any comments, Helen. So I will ask for this report to be noted. So thank you, everybody there. So item 9, internal audit progress report. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an update on internal audit activity since the last progress report was brought to this committee. So as I've already covered within the annual report, a number of the reports that have been finalised in that period related to items from the 24-25 audit plan. But to make sure that you had full oversight of those, the full details is included here, and obviously highlighted within in terms of the overall opinions in the annual report earlier on the agenda. So those are summarised for you in section 2.5 of the report as usual. There is also provided for you a copy of the current year's internal audit plan from page 9 of the appendix, page 149 of the pack, and that shows you the status of each of the audits at the time of producing this progress report. And I can confirm that since then we have issued our first report in relation to the first audit on the plan as well. So we're continuing to deliver the plan as scheduled. So just taking members briefly through the reports that have been finalised. As I mentioned, they have been summarised in the report earlier, but just to walk you through the findings as we do with all of the others that have already been to the committee. So from page 143 of the pack, the first audit related to financial systems key controls. So this is an annual audit, but each year we look at different key financial controls and have a deep dive into those relevant areas. So the focus this year was on accounts payable, so essentially how we pay invoices, how we make payments to suppliers, and how we manage our supplier data around that process as well. So obviously this is an area where we want to see really good segregation of duties, approval of payments, and authorisation of orders and so on to ensure that we have a robust control framework over payments. So based on the testing that we performed and the review of the controls, we were satisfied with the controls in place around the review and approval of orders and the payment processing as well. So we also looked at new suppliers, which again was subject to a good approval and process and supporting audit trail. Again, changes to supplier bank details had evidence of verification, but there was some scope to clarify some of the notes on that, and an action has already been taken forward around that to just try and tighten the guidance in that area. But overall, we were satisfied with the control environment for the accounts payable processes. The other areas that we looked at related to recurring payments and car parking income. So for recurring payments, we did identify a need to have a consistent template in place for recording these payments to make sure that we have consistency across all service areas. And that's something that's being taken forward. So the type of payments that we'd be looking for here are things like utility bills, which would be subject to recurring payments throughout the year, which may vary in their values. And the last area, as I say, was around car parking income. So again, we looked at these two areas because they had been highlighted as potential risks, and the audit did identify some gaps in terms of the reconciliation processes. And this was an area where we have made a number of recommendations, both to strengthen the reconciliation process and also to address some data integrity issues that we identified as part of the audit. And those actions are being taken forward to make sure we improve the controls in that area. But that did, of course, bring the assurance opinion down in terms of compliance. So we have a good assurance for the control environment and a moderate assurance for compliance, primarily based on that car parking issue mentioned. But we've given a low organisational impact based on the materiality of those findings. So the next related to corporate health and safety. So members of the committee might recall this was an addition to the audit plan in March, so a late entry into the plan, but we have delivered it in time for the annual report. So this was looking at our compliance with the Health and Safety at Work Act and giving some assurance around the framework in terms of policies and guidance and controls. So a policy is in place, and we were satisfied that that was fit for purpose, and there is guidance in place with lead officers identified for the key roles. There is some scope to update some of that documentation to ensure it's fully up to date and subject to regular review. We're also satisfied with the risk assessment process that was in place, and there was scope again just to strengthen the review of actions coming out of those assessments, but generally it was an effective framework. We also looked at training records, which gave us assurance that training is provided to staff to ensure they operate in a safe manner, and specialist training is available when needed. We also looked at the annual audit process that takes place within the council, and again, we're satisfied with how this was taking place. But we did make some recommendations around clarity on some of the scoring, where issues had been identified but were perhaps not as manageable, but we needed to be reflective in the scores. So overall, we've given a good assurance opinion for the control environment and the compliance, and a low organisational impact. The next was another annual audit. So each year we do an audit on compliance with the council's contract procedure rules in the procurement of goods and services. And we also included this time some review on compliance with the new Procurement Act and the readiness for that, given that came into place in February 2025. So generally, we did identify some gaps around the contract register entries where we weren't able to give assurance that was being consistently updated. And we also identified some areas of spend where contracts were not yet in place. So actions were being taken forward in relation to this to ensure compliance going forward. As a second part of the audit, we also then selected some contracts from the last year for sample testing, and we selected 8 contracts. Of those, all were either compliant or exempt from some of the requirements, so we have no issues to flag in relation to that sample. So overall, based on some of the issues that noted, we gave a moderate assurance opinion for the control environment and compliance and a medium organisational impact. The next related to rent arrears. So this is around the recovery of rental income for our housing properties. So obviously this is a key control to make sure that we are receiving the funds that we should to support the HRA and provide the support for repairs and so on that we need to fund from that money. So a 10-point plan was already underway and substantially delivered at the time of the audit. So we focused a lot on the areas where actions had already been taken. When we selected a sample of arrears, we were pleased to find that 100% of those selected in the sample had been subject to recovery activity during the financial year, and there was evidence of comprehensive notes around the action that had been taken, which enabled us to have a good audit trail around that work. We also noted a reduction reported around rent arrears for current tenants. And we also looked at the notices of seeking possession to make sure that we were happy with the process being followed there, which appeared compliant based on the samples that we performed. The other area we did look at was former tenant arrears. Now here we did identify a number of issues with non-compliance with expected controls, and the recovery activity was not consistent and regular as we would have hoped. However, this had already been identified as an area for improvement and was due to change in terms of process and responsibility around the time of the audit. And hopefully this will look to strengthen controls in that area. On that basis, we have given a good level of assurance on the basis that will be taken forward, and we have given a good level of assurance for compliance as well, and a low organisational impact given the direction of travel. And the last was in relation to building control partnership. So the council is part of the Leicestershire Building Control Partnership along with another range of authorities. We actually conducted this as a shared audit, though we, at the same time as doing this audit, we also performed the audit for Harborough District Council and Rutland County Council, who are also part of the partnership. So that enabled us to deliver the audit more effectively. So the findings generally were that the framework was in place, the governance was in place around the partnership, and meetings took place and performance was being reported upon, although we did identify a number of areas where it could be further strengthened. At the time of the audit, there was a lack of clarity around the extending of the agreement in March 2025. So we did identify an opportunity for further options appraisal to ensure we were maximising value for money. We also identified that there was no publishing of the accounts in relation to the Building Control Partnership. So under the Building Control Act 2010, there should be a publishing of the income and expenditure by the council in relation to building control to give some assurance and transparency around the service. That hadn't been taking place either at a partnership level or at a council level, so there is an action around addressing that, which I understand is being taken forward. And we also recommended some greater reporting to elected members around performance of this partnership as well, to increase the transparency and scrutiny of the service as well. So overall, again, we've given a moderate assurance for the control environment and the compliance, and a medium organisational impact. So also within the report is an update on the implementation of audit actions that have arisen from the report. So as provided in Appendix 2, page 13 of the appendix, page 153 of the pack, you can see that there were 10 actions which have been implemented since the last committee meeting. And there are currently 23 actions which remain overdue. Of those, there are 2 that are high priority and over 3 months overdue, which are the same actions which did come to the previous meetings. And due to the nature of those, again, they are provided as an exempt appendix this evening. And obviously would need to go into private session to go into any further detail on those actions. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, on the detail of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Just before, are there any questions on the exempt paper? On the exempt paper, and if there's not, but just to reiterate, Appendix B is exempt. So we've got no questions on that. So I'm not going to propose we go into private session. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I mean, the first one really is just an observation that I was very pleased to read notwithstanding the issue about former tenant arrears, that in general the direction of travel on rent arrears has been very positive. Not only have arrears reduced significantly, but in the sample taken, 100% of current tenants in arrears had been contacted appropriately. And I think that shows that the new strategy and the new working methods being adopted in housing are being effective and should be welcomed. So that's really just an observation. The other issue I just wanted to, and it just possibly because of my past and my suspicious nature, I was actually quite surprised to notice on car parking cash income that there's no reconciliation between the cash and tickets issued. And it only set a slight alarm bell going, because I once represented a very imaginative group of fraudsters in a council car park. I think I can say it now, they'll all be dead by now, the Guildford 7. And I'm aware that this is an area where there is a risk. And I just wondered, whilst you've flagged it up, there's no indication that is going to change. Is that correct? That we're still not going to have a reconciliation between tickets issued and cash?
No, I think there was a recommendation made, and that'll be tracked, so that needs to be implemented. I think the new car parking machines that we're intending to implement will assist with that as well.
John will kick me here, but if we took the transaction by Bitcoin, it's all absolutely reconciled, and the way it's gone up since this meeting would be more money in the bank. But yeah. Any other members? Alison.
Thank you, Chair. It's just kind of a maybe a statement that we've got an audit on procurement compliance, and we've just kind of I've just spoke really highly of the exemption report. Was there any correlation between the two? Because if we obviously it was an exception report, an exemption, or no, yeah, that was the right word. And then, but at the same time, we've got the an audit on procurement compliance. Were there any links?
Through you, Chair. So I suppose the link would be that in one of the examples that we looked at, it had gone through the exemption route. So it would have been one of those that would have been on the table had that been in place at the time. So we did audit that, and we were satisfied with the process it had gone through in terms of approval and the justification. Obviously, those that are not subject to exemptions would not feature in the other item, but that's where the crossover would be.
I think I may have said this before. Rory Sutherland says this about car parking income, and he says about council, since they end up they change from cash to card payments, they've ended up realising that their income ended up exponentially going up, and that's not because necessarily more people were parking. It was because something else was going on. Which, but I think I've read in here the variance no more than £4. Is that correct? So.
So the reconciliation that we mentioned around the tickets to the money was not taking place at all. This was a separate reconciliation around the records, around the financial side, and that's where there was a difference of up to £4. Yes.
Yes, so it probably is something that needs to be probably kept an eye on as well. This person, it has passed away, so but I won't reveal their name. But he used to collect the money from the great pickled onions, as he would call it, GPO telephone boxes, and I think on Fridays they'd all go down the pub and have a few spending on it, and then hand it in on the Monday. So I think we've all heard those stories. So yes, I'm not saying it always happens, but I know when as I say, what Roy Sutherland was saying, who is a great individual to listen to about how he views the world in marketing and all the other stuff. But what he was saying about how, if you change your processes, it's amazing what falls out, and you sometimes should change a process even for the sake of it. Though he does advocate for Jaguar changing its new image, and he says it's getting new customers, and it's probably time to ditch the old. But there we will see. Right. So I believe that this recommendation notes that the audit delivery. Rachel, thanks again for the very detailed amount there. And thank you, members, for the questions on that. Again, if there are any times, even before the meeting, if any members want to raise any of the points or whatever before either the meeting or indeed before the reports come out, I know Simon, who can't be here today, he very much looks into car parking and is very passionate about car parking as well. That can help inform us what we need to look for the next year. But to note that, and I will move on to item 10, Rachel, which is I'm happy to say the last item of scheduled business, and this is also to note the outcome. But Rachel, over to yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is my last report today. So this is in relation to our external quality assessment. So as an internal audit service within the public sector, we have to be subject to an external quality assessment at least every 5 years. Now that applied under the public sector internal audit standards, which were in place until April 2025, and also remains a requirement under the global internal audit standards, which are now in place as well. So since we were formed as an authority at Northamptonshire in terms of the internal audit service, we have been doing annual self-assessment. So I do a self-assessment every year against the internal audit standards, and I've reported the outcome of that to you as part of my annual reports. That's also enabled me to build up an evidence base of how I've been reaching the outcomes that I've given. And that's given us an opportunity to then get to the point where we were ready for an external quality assessment. So I felt we now had enough evidence. We were in a place where that was useful. Also, with the new global internal audit standards coming into place, we thought it would be useful to have that assessment to inform any gap analysis around what we need to further develop to align with the new standards as well. So as a committee, you need to receive this report, and I wanted you to have a full copy of the report. So I appreciate it's a lengthy report that's attached, but I wanted you to have a full copy so you full transparency around that. Essentially, the outcome of the assessment is provided within the report. I have provided in the covering report some background information for you as a committee around the appointment of the assessor, so you can be suitably assured around his independence and his qualifications and ability to undertake the assessment. I've also provided you with an insight into the assessment process, which included a review of audit files for all of our clients, so included a sample of audits for Melton Borough Council, and he reviewed the files and the work that we delivered for you. It also just summarises the outcome of that as well. So the overall outcome is provided on page 165 of the pack in the green box, which is essentially that Northamptonshire Council's internal audit service is delivering to a standard that generally conforms with the public sector internal audit standards. Now, just to put that into context, that is the highest rating that we can achieve. So I know it doesn't sound overwhelming as a rating, but that is as generous as they get with their wording on this. So that's a really pleasing outcome for me and for the team, and hopefully gives you some good level of assurance around the quality of the work that's informed your 24-25 annual opinion and annual governance statement. So I won't go through the full report, but just to draw out a few sections. So as I mentioned, on page 165, you have the final conclusion. On page 168, there's a breakdown of the 3 areas that are assessed. And as is shown, we were assessed as either excelling or established in all of the areas that were assessed. There is also some benchmarking within the report on pages 186 and 187, where our service is the second bar in the bar chart that's provided. And this shows that we have performed higher than the average in all of the areas in terms of local government, and also as including other sectors in the other chart, where we've achieved higher than the average in all of the areas apart from housing that I've just put us to the post on the resources element. So also within the report, I just wanted to include my response to the findings as well, and an action plan so that you can be assured around how we're taking things forward. So there are 2 further appendices that are attached this evening, just to provide my response, because I think in a number of the areas we are actually already doing what's been recommended, but it's just a case of taking it a little bit further. Just to also note that this does reflect the work that we do for all 5 of our clients. So some of the actions may be more applicable to other councils than Melton. So for example, some of our councils are more mature in terms of their risk management arrangements than others, so we're able to place more reliance upon them. So some may not be directly applicable to this authority. But I'm happy to take questions, Chair, on any of the detail within the report, and thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for all the reports you provided today and the level of detail you've gone into them. So from my own personal point of view, I'm very grateful to you and your team, and it is reassuring to see some of the very, very high praise comments that have come in on the assessment. Members. No, okay. So I think the members are saying exactly what I've just said. So thank you very much. That one is also to note. I do like these noting ones. So that concludes the business for today. For urgent business, there is no urgent business, but I do want to put on record my thanks as chair of the standards subcommittee to the officers who prepared for that meeting that was heard. So Adam and the team from Democratic Services, I would like to thank all the papers that were presented to me and the committee. None of them are here, so I can't thank them in person, but I did thank their time. It was a very long meeting, so I'm very grateful to all the councillors, including the housekeeping team, for all the work that they did. Clive, thank you very much for your support as well on that. I'm very grateful to you, and I know the subcommittee were as well. And that's it. So thank you very much, members. And that time's not right. At 19:58, that's the close of the meeting. Thank you very much.